Okay, guys, Chris and Nathan here for The Arena, the podcast, The Arena. And one thing we are hyper focused on is breaking down echo chambers. And right now there's 44,000 denominations of Christianity and growing. And each one of those denominations is just a minor echo chamber. And so today I am super excited and humbled to sit down with Kevin Kraut. He is a fundamentalist Mormon, and he is here just to discuss Mormonism, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and he is a wealth of knowledge. We also have off camera Dallin, one of the editors of The Religion Business and a massive part of The Religion Business just because he was raised LDS and he is far more knowledgeable than Chris and I. So this is going to be a fascinating discussion. This is the first of many tearing down echo chambers. So Kevin, thanks for being here.
You bet.
Yeah, so where do we even start? You have a book bigger than the King James with the Apocrypha sitting in front of you. And this book is titled, guys, Ensign to the Nations. And so give me a little background on the book and who you are.
Okay, my father, Kevin Kraut, was a well-known author in the LDS church. And his first book that he wrote was called Jesus Was Married. And he got approval by the president of the church because he walked in and he handed him the book and he looks at it and he goes, "Oh yeah, that story's right there in the Bible." You know, his wedding. It was his wedding when he provided for the wine, because even today it's the groom that's responsible for that. And so he says, "Yeah, that's the president of the church saying this," and he says, "But maybe you ought to call it maybe Jesus was married or was Jesus married or something like that." And Dad goes, stubborn German he was. He goes, "Well, was he or wasn't he?"
Those dang Germans.
And he goes, "Okay, that's good. Go ahead and write it." And so he wrote this book, and I mean, all the general authorities, Bruce R. McConkie, others, he just outsold them all. And then he started other topics, and he just started all the different topics in the LDS religion that some are questionable, like the Adam God doctrine. He wrote a whole book on that. And Hugh Nibley always referred people to it so that they wouldn't go anti-Mormon and that kind of thing. It's a very fascinating subject. Gets into all different religions have this. Even Native Americans believe in that. And so anyway, he before he wrote the books, he had a dream, and in this dream, an angel came through the window, and he carried a big book. And in that big book, he opened it up, and my dad was looking at it, and he was going through, kind of turning the pages and telling him, showing him what this book was. And then it kind of realized, my dad goes, "Oh, that's kind of how I would write that." And then he looked up at the angel in his mind and said, because they do mind to mind here, you know. Mm-hmm. And he said, "So, are these my writings?" And the angel nodded his head, "Yes." Shut the book, out the window he went. Mm. And so before my dad died, he said, "Okay, there's 72 books. We got this all done. I want this color. I want this thing." And now this is the big book that.
Wow.
So this is everything he wrote. It's 4,700 pages.
72 books in here?
Yeah.
Wow.
And it has a huge index. So the indexing was what was really fascinating, because you could go through the whole everything that was there, and it has the two different indexing methods.
So your dad wrote 72 books.
Yep.
Each book, just to confirm, is on a different topic in regards to, was Christ married, or, you know, is it specific to LDS theology, or is it just kind of Christian theology in general?
Some were that way. He actually wrote a book that had no LDS doctrine in it at all. It was all based on old Christian writings, and it was called Polygamy in the Bible. And so that book actually, there was a famous, I can't think of his name, it wasn't Billy Graham, but it was somebody like him. And he got up and he was preaching against polygamy, that it's all fake and false and bad. And his secretary came in and she she said, "I quit. I'm done." And he says, What do you mean? You can't leave. You got passwords. You got this. You know everything about me. I really depend on you. What's wrong? And so she picked up the Bible and threw it at him, and she says, "If you don't understand that polygamy is in the Bible, then I'm not working for you. I'm not doing this. And he says, well, give me some background. I don't understand. So she picked up this book called Polygamy in the Bible by Ogden Kraut, my dad, and she hands it to him and says, why don't you read that overnight? And so he read it overnight, gets up the next morning, calls her and says, I got the picture. I understand now. Mm. So there really was polygamy. It really was an established thing. It really was in Judaism. I mean, you couldn't even be a rabbi unless you had 2 wives.
Yeah, in the Old Testament, there's a lot of, how many wives did Solomon have?
Is it 700 or 7,000?
Yeah, 700? Yeah.
That sounds like exhausting.
and that was, there's another Bible thing in there, and it says multiplying wives is against God's law. And so when David and Solomon started multiplying wives, so many, it began to be an abomination. That was the part that wasn't good.
Gotcha.
But which is also, we talked about Iran and other places. That's why they worship Abraham, but he had 4 wives, and if he's the great one, then we can't really go past that. So in a lot of those religions, they only have 4 wives.
So 4 is the max.
That's correct.
In polygamy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What? Okay, so I have two questions. I'm fascinated by this, and it's just more from a definition standpoint. Fundamentalist Mormon. What exactly does that mean?
Okay. Good point. So what happens is in 1890 in the LDS Church, you got John Taylor here, and the government's breathing down our religion, and they're confiscating our properties. They're taking away things. They're trying to extinguish 3 things of the Mormon Church. The first one was polygamy, but that wasn't. They didn't care. They had all their wives and their prostitutes and whatever. That wasn't a big thing. But they used it as a tool, and they made it out to be a really bad thing and an evil thing and whatever. But the real thing that they were after United Order, because we had our own system of wealth, and we weren't borrowing money from the banks, and we're just running like the Amish, and we were doing our work. And
so what is United Order? Because this is fascinating to me, because right now, with what's happening with Bobby Kennedy and Trump, a lot of people are pointing to the Amish actually saying, look, they have no disease. They have no,
Correct.
They don't take drugs. They don't take Tylenol. It's fascinating right now. The government's like, look at how amazing the Amish are. So what is United Order?
Okay, so basically it's all things in common. Okay, so we share all things. And it's just like the Amish, where they have their economic. I actually did a big research project in college, and it was called, when I finally finished this, it's not a thesis, but close to it. It was called The Economic Order of the Amish, because I studied economics and tutored it and all that. And so I wrote this, and it was so fascinating. Everybody was fascinated with the thing. And basically what that is we start looking at each other and we go, okay, well, let's build a business platform, and we're going to get 10 farmers together, and those 10 farmers are going to all work together in this whole, it's a partnership, in a way. And so now you got 10 men there. Now you have to buy 1 tractor, you have to buy 1 swather, because everybody's working with it, right? And so it's a co-op.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds very much like a co-op. Yeah,
and I my father, my grandfather, and my father and others were farmers. And so when you start looking, like down in Arizona where I was from, they had these huge cotton gins that all the farmers had got together and put their money and resources into building these cotton gins. And, the first time they ran through, they made millions and millions of dollars. And then they looking at the other gins and going, they were ripping us off, And so that way they could know where their money is going. They knew that they were making the money, and they had that.
A little transparency.
And not only transparency, but it makes me think of our buddy Steve Jarvis, and like how farming in America is having like rural individual farms are having such a problem right now. And it's like, man, maybe co-ops are the way to go. My dad actually ran a nonprofit down in Central America, and they would co-op mountain ranges. So like all these rural coffee farmers who, had small plot farms, they couldn't even get it was coffee. They couldn't get their green coffee to the shipping harbor because, they might only have 80 trees or 100 trees. So they've only got a couple 100 pounds of coffee, and it's just not even worth them taking it down. And so what they would do is they'd co-op an entire mountain range. They'd buy one truck, and then everybody could use that truck to get their green coffee down to the harbor.
There you go.
And it made everybody lots of money.
Absolutely. And
so you're telling me community is better than individuality?
Well, see, and I will get it more in definition here, but as human creatures on this earth, we gather like sheep. Mm. That's why the Savior used this, and when we're working together and we're around each other, we're happier, we progress more. And the farmers down home, I mean, if one of them had a crop that was out, and all of a sudden here comes the rain, everybody's there. Mm. Every farmer in the valley, they would stop church to go help somebody in a catastrophe so that they could, get everything taken care of. Why? Because they might be that person someday.
Mm-hmm. Reciprocity.
And so if you see this happening, I in my thesis, I put this down and I said, if we could each have only one thing that we bought or whatever, but we're borrowing the system and we're utilizing the tractors and the cars and the trucks and the best ability that we can, everybody would be a millionaire. Mm. That was my statement. Everybody would be a millionaire. Well, my cousin comes in and he's this brainy. I have a lot of savants in our family. They're just they don't relate to the real world. They're often, my brother's this way, but anyway. And so he is a doctorate in statistics. I don't know that there's anybody else out there in the world that's all they studied was statistics. Yeah. But as soon as he graduated, guess where he went? Vegas.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. He's made them
card counting.
Oh, he's made them lots of money down there.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. He's figured out. He knows a person walks in this door and he says, "Give me 3 things, and I can tell you exactly how much money he's going to make and how much money he's not."
Wow.
And he just figures everything.
Wow.
So very valuable. So he went through and looked at the math of all this, and he got done, and he said, "I guarantee you in 5 years, if 10 families put together their pot, worked with it in whatever business they're doing, and the wives didn't steal the money, or the accountant didn't run off with it or whatever, and they worked together and did this, they would all be millionaires. I guarantee that." And he went through the statistics and showed why it would work. That's why we're going to go back to the government. That's why the government, or the bad guys that ran the banking system, that's why they wanted the Mormon United Order out of the way. And so in 1890, they got rid of polygamy. 1891, they got rid of the economic order of the Mormon people. And then there was this kind of a secret thing that people didn't know about, and it was called the Council of 50. Have you ever heard of that?
I've heard of it, but I don't know much
So the
about it.
Council of 50 was their political power. So it was a political organization that came out of the church, and it was the kingdom of God, they called it. Mm. And this is why when Christ came, they're thinking he's going to build the kingdom. He's going to get into the political aspect of this. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't. It was more of the spiritual aspect.
Yeah, we always say in today's world, when you look at how Christianity, including the LDS Church, is building businesses and trying to influence government, if that's what Christ wanted us to do, Christ would have walked straight into Caesar and demanded a meeting with Caesar and said, "Let me tell you how we should run this." But Christ didn't care about Caesar. He's like, give to Caesar what Caesar wants and give to God what he wants. I'm focused on the spiritual aspects of humanity.
Correct.
So I have a question then. Why would the LDS Church in the late 1800s want to create a political order if Christ didn't really care about it?
Well, he did.
Okay.
He did. It just wasn't his work at that time.
Oh, gotcha.
And so actually, when you look at in Mormonism on the garment, okay, you can go down to the very last endowment house that they had. An endowment house was kind of like the tent that Moses had until they could get the temple built.
Yeah.
And so this is a small house, and they did endowments. They did these kind of things. And on the garment itself, there's an L and a V. Okay, and then next on that endowment house, you see these symbols, and then it says liberty and virtue. So the big L, liberty and virtue. And so those two things are the foundation of heaven. That's what they're built on. Okay, and so it's religion and politics, if you will. And so that's what the Council of 50 was for, and they had 3 or 4 members that could not be LDS because they had to have a representative of the outside Christian people. So the Mormons couldn't come along and say, "Hey, we're gonna make a law that you can't drink on Sunday." Well, that's okay, but what about our freedoms? We have a right to do that. You can't make a law.
Sounds like we had a brilliant woman here yesterday from Iran, and the leadership council in Iran has one Christian seat. so one Christian.
At least
can
there's
sit.
one seat.
So they can say, "Hey, we're not all Islamic."
Right. Exactly. And that's the same thing as what this Council of 50 was.
Yeah.
And in our belief system, it's there's a lot of folklore. There's a lot of things that we look at and we go, well, maybe that's why this happened. Like Jesus was married, we fully believe that. Brigham taught that most of his council were descendants of Jesus Christ. Okay, and there's a whole story about that. Well, I'll tell part of that story. My dad went to a Jewish rabbi, big guy, years back. And then he was talking to him after the program, and he was saying, well, what do you write? And he goes, yeah, I write on all these topics and different things. And my dad had a photographic memory, so he knew a lot about Judaism. So he started talking about these
Your dad, the
things.
photographer, had a photographic memory.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I have a whole story on that. It's real fun. He didn't need a camera.
Yeah, exactly.
so anyway, so he got talking to this Jewish guy, and the Jewish guy says, wait a minute, you wrote a book called Jesus Was Married? And he says, yes. And he says, you believe that? And he goes, yes. Do you believe that he had posterity? Well, yes. We believe he was a polygamist. And the Jewish guy goes, yeah, he probably was. At that time, they believed in the law of Abraham, having more wives. And he says, oh my gosh, we went to the Catholics, we went to the Baptists, we went to all these different ones, and we never even considered Mormons. But that's why we don't believe that he's a savior. How could he be? Because in Isaiah, there's an actual prophecy that says when he comes again, he'll see the face of his children. He'll see his posterity. He'll see his children's children. But he'll see descendants of his own self. And so that's why we, the Jewish community, didn't believe that Jesus could even be part of that. And there's still more things out there that, they went into. But that was one interesting part that he said that could fit, that he was the Messiah if he actually did have posterity. Then, of course, we have the whole, Da Vinci Code and that whole thing.
We can unpack that.
Yeah, and I had an experience about Henry Lincoln. He was the one that wrote, he and Bajan wrote Holy Blood, Holy Grail.
Let's go back to this 3 things the government was trying to tear down, though, or end.
Okay, yeah.
Just to put a button on this because I find it fascinating. So one is United Order.
Yep.
One is polygamy, and the other is this Council of 50, right?
Which was a political kingdom.
So is that what? Because this was happening in Wisconsin or Indiana. What state was Missouri?
Oh, Missouri,
was all this happening in Missouri at the time?
No, this is all happening out here.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So this is John Tater's time. So it's around 1890.
Okay.
They're putting forth a lot of economic, political, and social.
Is it because I'm gonna be the counter argument? Is it because the U.S. government was afraid that this kind of counter government would rise up?
You got these Mormons out here that have united order, and they're gaining more wealth than anybody we've ever seen. They're breeding like rats. You gotta get rid of them. I mean, 33 kids. Let's see, and then because my family, he only had 2 wives, but he had like 13 kids each or something. I go back in this family thing, and now they're everywhere. So they really were, and then they had their own political system, better than their system, and that was a threat to the
So it literally was an economic and political threat to the U.S.
The economic and political were the 2 things. They just used polygamy as a pry bar. But the real thing that they were concerned about is the money, because they were literally, Orderville, which is in southern Utah, it was buying out all these lands and everything and all this around, and they were scared of that.
So in 1890, the federal government, or was it the state government?
Federal.
The federal.
There was no state at that time.
Yeah.
We were actually trying to get state.
Okay, so this is fascinating to me. Like the federal government already foresaw, which I tip my hat to the LDS Church. It is a money-making machine. We had a gentleman here yesterday who's raised LDS and really smart businessman, and he said it. He said the business model of the LDS Church is just a machine, and it's true. So I find it fascinating because we don't try to cast judgment on anybody, whether that be Kenneth Copeland or anybody in the show. It's like, no, we're just dissecting systems. When you take United Order and then you map a business model on a capitalistic business model on top of that, if that makes sense. So United Order is the base. So everybody shares everything. And I can see that in the LDS Church. You can kind of feel that with tithes and fast offerings. They're very generous, right? But then you have a capitalistic endeavor set on top of that. It's the perfect machine to scale because on the base, it's, I don't want to use the word socialist, but it has that social feel where it's like, hey, what's mine is yours. And that I would say is very Christ-like, because Christ did say to pool and give freely. But we talked about this yesterday, and we've talked about it a bunch, how Christ had a somewhat socialist message in regards to community, but not government can't be socialist because humans, there's always greed that gets involved with it. And so it's such a unique history lesson for me right now, because the U.S. government in the 1890s, per Kevin here, already foresaw that model as being dangerous to the institution.
What was the banking model at that time?
Well, they had a banking. Brigham started a banking system, and he had, but it was all for inner working to make sure that everything. That's what they were afraid of. So they were the real root reason why we weren't borrowing from the banks. We're not paying any interest. We're not doing any of that.
Therefore, you can't be subservient to them.
Yeah. So really, it goes back to money. That's what they were really worried about. I mean, the political thing was kind of getting there, but the real root thing, I think, was about the money. They wanted to make sure that we were under their cuff. Yeah. And yep. And
so 1892 happens. United Order's torn down. So to Chris's point, when does the split in the church happen, so to speak? So you have fundamentalist Mormonism, and now you have what would you even call the current status quo of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints?
Yeah, just the core church.
Let's talk about that split.
Yeah, that split. So John Taylor, before 1890 happened, John Taylor, I believe he was very inspired, and he had a revelation, and he came in and he said, I'm telling you that the next guy in line after I die, he's going to give in to the government. He's just it's going to happen. Wilford Woodruff. And he said, and when he does, all these things are going to happen. So I'm going to set up a kind of an underground group of people. So he set apart patriarchs. He set apart other men. And and so they were all prepared, and they had a council of friends. There was another council that was part of the priesthood, and that was kind of underground too. And then sure enough, Wilford Woodruff gave in. And one of the things that was unique was one time I was praying about Wilford Woodruff, and I was down at a friend's house in southern Utah, and I just had that instinct. Pick up the book and open it up, and it'll fall right where it needs to go. And so, and there's a whole story behind that. But anyway, I got in there, and sure enough, it was the last few pages of Wilford Woodruff's life. And after he had given into the government and made all these covenants and done all these things, and I have a friend that was General Authority's nephew, and he went up to find a journal that I was looking for, and he and the archivist were in there digging through some vaults and different things, and the archivist picked up this paper and put it down, and then he's looking through all this stuff, and he's looking at this paper, and he goes, "Oh my heck." And he says it was a contract between Wilford Woodruff and, we're not going to call it federal government, but the guys behind the government, the bankers, and there was, it wasn't like Rockefeller and all these guys. It was like the underlings, Chase, or different ones that were there. He told me the names, but I couldn't remember. But they were kind of the underlings. And this was a contract where he basically kind of gave up the whole church and says, "Here, it's yours," and signed it.
Wow.
With Woodruff. Now, in Isaiah, it talks about the drunkards of Ephraim, who we think in the LDS church, that's us. Okay. In the mountains, it talks about the mountains and other things. And the drunkards of Ephraim, they're making all these mistakes, right? And one of the things they do is they make a covenant with death and hell. That was the covenant. Wow. And so when that happened, everything in the church changed. Everything became Babylon. It became worldly. And you can see all the doctrines dying. So now we don't talk United Order anymore. We don't talk about other priesthood type things. We don't go into the depths that we did. And then slowly, it's just we're leaving more and more away from the spirituality of the early Mormon church, which they were having all kinds of visions and all the blessings, that were followed by those who believe. I mean, Lorenzo Snow walked in one time. There's this girl, she's dead for an hour. And he knows that she's supposed to come back. And so but she doesn't want to. She's all prepared. She's ready to go, And so she combs her hair so she can meet, the guys on the other side of the veil. And so she gets over there and she's all happy. And then come back. He's telling her to come back. And he gives her a blessing and makes her come back. And he says, "But I'm not going to be here when she comes back. She's going to be pretty mad." and then it takes a while for her to come back. It's like a half hour or something. He's gone for forever. And then finally she just pops out of it and comes back. And where did he go? Where is that guy? She's mad. She's ready to get onto Lorenzo Snow for bringing her back.
Jeez.
It's real fascinating. So these kind of things were happening at that time, and now we've lost that. Even Dallin Oaks in a meeting says we don't have those gifts anymore. We don't have those things. And I'm going to try and recite this verse, but it's in Doctrine and Covenants 70, verse 14. And basically, the Lord's saying in there, nevertheless, you're supposed to have all things in common. Okay, you're supposed to have all things in common. And if you don't, then the abundance of the manifestations of the Spirit will be withheld. And so that's kind of one of the things that happened with us was we gave up United Order. We gave up this brotherhood. That's the other thing they're afraid of is that strong brotherhood. You hurt my brother, everybody's coming after you. We're going to have a war.
Yeah.
And so once that happened, then those abundance of the manifestations started going away. So people ask, well, how do you have these revelations? How do you have these manifestations? So if you mentally got into the concept in your mind that you're living United Order or you're trying to live it, and you look at that in life and you're willing to give up money or give up things. I served a mission in New Zealand. And the first problem with going to New Zealand is you don't want to look at any of their things with any kind of a wanting or asking. Like I got down there and I asked, hey, where did you get those sheepskins? I want to buy one for my mom. My companion's like elbowing me. No, don't do that. You're going to take that out, packed it all up. Here you go, elder, have this, And it took me for a long time to figure out that the Maori people will give you anything. It's tato tato. You almost mentioned it. It's what's mine is yours and yours is mine. We share everything. Native Americans are that way. I grew up with them. And once you get into that mode, that's why all these New Zealanders, they had miracle after miracle. Matthew Calley went down there. They fully believe in things. I mean, I gave a whole huge talk on all the miracles of the Maori people because they just, people raising people from the dead. And
were you on the North Island or the South Island or both? North, yeah. North. I've been in New Zealand's amazing. And the land is so raw. It's still it's still
back to the basic way.
Yeah, it's incredible. Yes. New Zealand definitely is probably, in my opinion, the most unique place in the world for where the earth is still evolving, lava fields and just those geysers in the earth is just, you see creation happening in front of you still in New Zealand.
It's so beautiful. It is really true.
Okay. So there's so many fascinating ways we can take this because, so the fundamentalist Mormons or what became fundamentalist Mormons, the church splits, you have, what did you call it? The core.
Yes.
And then you have the fundamentalist Mormons. It's almost like there's, and I keep on going back. My mind flashes back to the Amish all the time because it's what I know more. But it's that crossing of the line. There's no gray area in the idea of United Order, right? It's just like you're either doing it or you're not. Right. And it's fascinating that you tie it back to all these Aboriginal tribes. Because it's true. Most Aboriginal tribes, I don't want to claim all, but the small studies I've done. They are in United Order. Like the Aboriginals always see things like that. And so I see that black and white line too in regards to America, right? You have capitalism, you have the republic. It's so antithetical to this type of United Order that you have to totally keep them separate, if that makes sense. And it's that idea of that we're wrestling with personally of the government. I do think the Republican capitalism in its pure intent is the best form of government is in regards to experiment, but it runs antithetical to this type of teaching or even, the message of Christ and Paul in the New Testament. It's like it does run antithetical. So it's like oil and water. You have to keep them separate. And maybe the founding fathers recognize that, and that's why they have the First Amendment,
Yeah.
It's like keep this separate. But we see muddling in the LDS Church. We see it from the business side of it. And then also right now in the nation in particular, we see Christianity and government melding in this way. We were sitting with a woman a couple days ago and, she's all about miracles and she was calling out witchcraft when she was 9.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. And it's like, there is that idea of miracles. And I think I'm here today because of a miracle. Like I should have been dead when I was 16. And so we have kind of pushed off that whole spiritual realm of Christianity into a dark corner. But you see it more in developing nations and in third world nations. You really see that where money is not guaranteed and wealth is not there, and you're living day by day, so to speak. Like those miracles happen more and more, or maybe you just see them. But so what happens? Let's segue. Ensign
to the
nations. What is ensign?
Okay, so the ensign was the flag that was flowing up on Ensign Peak. And so an ensign is a flag, basically. And this flag represented the liberty, the kingdom of God, what was happening. It's quite interesting because there was a lot of really interesting stories like the 3 Nephites. My dad wrote a book on that. and in one of the stories of the three Nephites was Betsy Ross, when they were designing the flag and the 13 things or whatever, there was a guy that came and he had this trunk and he was helping her and talking to her about it and all this, described him. And then all of a sudden he just disappeared. And people would have, they'd see him and then talk to him and then he'd go. And so this flag looks almost like the flag from those 13 states. And so this is how it came about. The flag itself, people said, well, Brigham Young actually mounted it on a flag on the Ensign Peak.
So where is Ensign Peak?
It's right above the Capitol.
Really?
Yeah,
oh my!
right up there.
You think you know something, and then you don't. The more you know, the less you know. So Ensign Peak is a physical mountain here in Utah.
Yes. Now, the thing about it is, another friend, they had a placard there for years, and we're trying to find more information on it, because Brigham said it was planted by an angel. An angel brought it.
Brought the flag
and put it there. And so in Mormon culture, like the three Nephites, they're translated beings. So John and others walk the earth. And then it says angels unaware. You don't know. And so these are people who've progressed. They've gone to a higher level, and now they're here on this earth helping us and working through. And I have a friend, and talk about miracles. This guy, he was like one of the Jedi Knights. He was like, he just could just. It was amazing. We went all the way to Alaska, and he has a car that's not even licensed. And I go, how are we going to get through the border? Oh, no problem, And then, he walks in and the lady's sitting there and she looks at his stuff and he's kind of mind to mind working with her and she's laughing and she goes, oh, you boys, you just have a good time, and stamps it and hands it back to him. And I go,
in an unregistered.
And I'm going, what the heck did she stamp? And he goes, my mining claim. Had nothing to do with and then a policeman was following me around in the middle of the night, and we were driving all the way up there in this little Geo Metro, craziest thing in the world, but anyway.
To Alaska.
Yeah. And and he's supposed to be kind of a miner, a big miner, but I wanted to go see all these big boys that, had books that they wrote and get all their signatures. And then every one of them were asking him questions. Hey, Tom, what about this? What about? And I finally figured out he was the king of all this. He's the one that really knew everything and started everything. It was amazing. But anyway, this policeman's following us around, and I wake him up and I go, Tom, this policeman's following us. We don't have any license plates that are legal and all this. And he goes, oh, yeah? Where? Oh, well, he'll go away. He'll go away. Just like that, the guy stops the car. The policeman stops the car and literally turned around and went the other way.
No way.
And I went, okay, I understand there's those spiritual people out there and they have those gifts. Yeah.
I wanted to go back to something here. So who's the president's name in 1890?
In 1890 was Wilford Woodruff.
Okay, and then after that it was another gentleman.
Lorenzo Snow.
All right, and then 1907, right, is it Joseph G. Smith? Joseph F. Smith, sorry. Made a comment, and this is in our docu-series. It said he was saying that there'll come a day when tithing is no longer required. And he goes there'll come a day where we have tithes sufficient in the storehouse of God to where we don't no longer need tithes.
Okay, so let me try and explain. So in early Mormonism, and Dad explains it this way, because in the Book of Mormon, it doesn't mention tithing until after they were living all things in common. And so Dad figured out how they really did it back then was your order of 10 families or 100 families or whatever, because that's one order. That's a united order right there. And so Orderville was in its own order, its own thing.
I love that it's called Orderville, too.
Yeah. Oh, and Orderville was the biggest one. They was buying everything.
Wow. And is that still a city today?
Yeah. It's still down there.
Gotta go check that place out.
I know.
And so then what happens is, And we talk about the Amish, but I want to also talk about the Mennonites and the Hutterites. And so, anyways, then you, as the order, your first year you made 100,000, and the Lord doesn't require anything the first year. Second year, now you made 110,000. So how much did you increase?
10%.
Yeah, you increased $10,000. Okay, the Lord wants you to pay on your increase, not just on your money you're getting as a paycheck or whatever.
So you're paying on that 10,000.
And it even says in the Doctrine and Covenants, the increase.
But you won't get a gross blessing.
Increase.
It also says on the increase in the Bible.
Right.
Like this is tithing is a fascinating subject.
So as you progress, now you have $10,000 or your increase. So now you pay 10% of your increase, which would be $1,000.
Yeah.
And you take that to the bishop's storehouse, and that's why he said storehouses, because then the bishop's storehouse would have sufficient to help other people or poor or people coming into the order.
Yeah.
So let that sink in, guys. This is super crucial, and this is like denominations aside, LDS aside, those tithes are specifically set aside to help the poor and the needy and the new into the order. It's not to accumulate your own wealth.
Correct.
Or build your brand.
Right.
Was the bishop assigned,
Yes.
make sure I understand this, the bishop was assigned in that storehouse, was that for that
Temporal.
order?
It's all for temporal things.
All for temporal things.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the bishop was over not spiritual. They made him into a spiritual guy now, but he was temporal. And so it was his duty to know who needed it at what time. We saw miracles with that because bishops would show up at people's houses and say, I just had this feeling you needed some food. And they'd just been praying for it, that kind of thing. Yeah. And so it was a special calling for them with the temporal welfare of the people.
Yeah.
And if you look at it, then it's kind of an unfair thing when you think about it, how they've got tithing now, how it evolved into this. Because now you have this widow, and she has this house payment, she has all this stuff and has hardly any money, but now she has to pay 10% of her income, right? And then there's this rich guy over here, and he's got this big, huge business, and, making millions and millions of dollars, 10% off his thing is nothing.
But also in this, and then I know that it's not like for everyone, but like I did a little bit of research and digging. Like most of the companies that build the temples, for example, are LDS members as well too. So you're paying a tithe into a system that's then giving your business.
Right.
And so it's this thing where then you have this whole section of people that are suffering.
Yes.
That are kind of being forgot about.
Right.
Or they're being, so this is that idea of oil and water. And I've had this, I literally have had this vision for a long time of oil and water. And it's, again, capitalism and the structure of the republic here is antithetical to United Order. They can't mix, right? And so when I look at the LDS church as a whole, when I look at the core, as you call it, and the research we've done, they've muddied the two to the point where tithing, it's almost used as it's welfare with contingencies now, into where that storehouse that you described in 1907, it sounds like that bishop saw that welfare storehouse or that storehouse as strictly for the needy. And I love that you point out you only pay tithe back in the day on your increase, but now even in Christianity as a whole, they just demand 10% of everything. And so to your point, a wealthy individual isn't hurt or isn't detrimentally affected the same way as someone who's making $30,000 a year who has to put food on the table for their two kids. And so it almost has become, in my opinion, tithing has become an abusive system.
Correct.
So you're saying in the LDS church back in the day, the system was not set up that way.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
When did that change?
1890.
No, when did they shift? Oh, in 1890.
They got rid of United Order. They had this. Oh, well, Lorenzo Stowe started up the tithing system.
But then in 1907, you had the president at the time say that when the tithes were sufficient enough in the storehouse, then they were never going to require.
But you have to, like, the way I always see it is, we see time as such a finite deal. So it's like, oh man, a year is a long time. But from 1890 to 1907, that's only 17 years. Like, those bishops probably still had the same, they had tentacles back in that old school United Order way.
They still had United Orders going, and the government came and told them to stop. And the church even told them to stop.
Yeah.
And then
so
they would
today
go out
there's
and start another one because they knew how it would work well.
So today I can still see, if I try to lift my bias, like remnants of United Order in the LDS core. Like you can feel it still, but it's not stated.
But there were fundamentalist groups that got together and they wanted to try and live United Orders. So they tried it the best they can. And some are still very efficient. They still have that basic ability of United Order. They even called it a united effort and other things. But
see, the one thing I would push back on you is I feel like Christ would never, like, just in my theology, he would never have cared about politics. That's why he never cared about, like, people who want to argue Christ say, oh, he didn't go out and outrightly say slavery was wrong. And it's like, well, in the 66 book canon, because he knew that his teachings, and this is just me and my theology, he knew his teachings would have massive implications on that. And he's not, if that makes sense, he's going to put value to life.
I can't remember the guy's name, but he wrote a book. It was really a valuable one my dad read. And what he talks about is the mission of Christ. Okay, and so he points out in Scripture that there's several times that Christ could have talked more about economics or this or that or political, but it wasn't his mission. And he even said so in a couple places in so many words. He says, well, that's not my mission. That's not what I'm here for.
100%, yeah.
And so, but that's not acknowledged. He's not saying that it's not important or not essential or whatever.
Well, exactly. I think that's what I mean is he didn't care about Caesar. He's like, what my mission is will influence Caesar.
Exactly. He wanted to fulfill his mission, and this is why the guy explains it. But he also showed in other places where, using some of the illustrations that he did or some of the stories he did, that he did care about politics. He was concerned, but he put it into a kind of a hidden way. So, and I'll have to find that book, but it was really interesting. He really knew what he was saying.
My favorite line in regards to politics that Christ says is, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's.
Yeah.
Like, to me, he almost said, like, governments are going to come and go. Dynasties will come and go and they'll die. Empires will fall. That's not what I care about.
I'm eternal.
And that's why, like, we posted a video this morning, like, real religion is dangerous to institutional power. What you were talking about, that United Order, I see that as very dangerous to institutional power, whether that be Germany or China or the U.S., because that is running antithetical to that order, whether that be communism. With communism is a joke because there's people on top, driving their greed down. But it's like, or whether that be a republic like the U.S., United Order is a very, it's very dangerous to power structures in particular, right?
Yes, but it's also powerful against the dark side. And when you get into demonics or dark spirits or dark things or entities or whatever, they feed off of people's pain. They feed off of people's worry, their stress, their
pride, their ego.
And so if you have United Order and you know that all your cares are taken care of, I mean, what's this book? I can't remember the guy's name, but he wrote it. How to Stop Worrying and Start Living, Dale Carnegie. And the number one cause of stress is money. I mean, we're all worried if it's not there, we don't have that. And so what United Order did was, well, and I've seen the future in a dream, and it's beautiful, where the people are in Zion, and they do have this. And it's quite interesting because the brotherhood is so strong. And, if you lost your home, we'd rebuild it. You don't need to worry about that. We'll have it built in a month.
I think there's a story about Amish. This guy's barn burns down.
Absolutely.
And the town comes in and they rebuild it in like 6 or 7 days.
It happens all the time. It's constant.
Yeah.
It's a barn raising. We just no problem. And if you if you go back in my era, even at Dugway, proving grounds, you watch the people there. They all work together. I mean, it was amazing how well, I'll take care of the kids. You do this and blah blah blah, and and anybody had something happen. I remember one of the families had a fire and burned all their stuff down. They had everything back in a month. I mean, did you need this? Do you need that? We'll help. We'll go get things. And that in your mind, when you have that point where you're like, wait a minute, I got hundreds of people who are going to take care of me. You don't sit there and go, oh, I won't have rent. I won't have any money when I get older. Oh, no, what am I going to do? Just in Arizona with those people, I mean, nobody went without. Nobody had a struggle. People were all there to help. And that's the beauty. That's the Zion aspect that Christ was trying to teach us, and how, and just like that scripture, nevertheless, you're to be equal. It's a commandment to the Mormon people and others. You are to be equal in these things. Yeah. Like the Amish, like the Hutterites, like the Mennonites.
Well, those early, you look at those early churches.
Yeah,
those early churches had that. You look at Paul.
What was his, I can't remember his name, Zacharias or whatever. Anyway, he's the one that held the money back, and then he dies. Remember
Ananias and
Ananias.
Sapphira.
Yeah, that's right. And his wife.
Yeah.
And so we look at that and we say, God's not going to put up with you cheating the system, because it'll break up all the spirituality. It'll bring in dark spirits. It'll.
Well, I love that story too, because so many pastors preach it as, hey, you need to give more. But that whole story was like, you could keep your land if you wanted to.
Sure.
You could have sold it and kept the money, but you lied, right?
Exactly.
It's not about what you wanted. You could have kept the land.
Yeah.
But it's the fact that you wanted to play in that oil and water separation, right?
Right.
Like you wanted to give a little bit, but not be honest about it. Like you could have just said, "Hey, this is what I feel I should give you."
That's right.
And they would have been great.
Yep.
I find it fascinating when I look at the early church, and Paul's writings, how it was all in common. And then when he would do. When in churches religions love to look at those early gatherings where they said, hey, bring everything to us and, pool your resources. Well, Paul always said, bring above what is above your surplus. Bring your surplus, not bring what you have, because, hey, you need to survive. You need to feed your kids. He would say, bring out of your surplus, which is kind of like the increase on your, that $10,000. But tithing and generosity has become so twisted that it's totally unbiblical, in my opinion, modern day tithing. But then it sounds like from what was happening in the 1890s, the LDS form of tithing today is also unbiblical or unscriptural.
It's definitely, yeah.
Well, when did fast offerings become a thing?
Well, they were always kind of back in the early days of Joseph Smith. Let's take the money that we would spend on food and give it to the poor. Let's do that. And so they were fasting all the time. They were fasting on Thursdays, and they were fasting during Sundays, and they were, all different times. And what's funny is even today in the LDS church, they still have a fast Sunday. And I was listening to Dr. Berg, and he says, the most powerful fast is one day, no food, no water. That's what the Mormons do every month. There you go, still doing it.
So would you say, because again, Chris and I always give the benefit of the doubt to everybody, would you say the core LDS faith now, which on paper, 2 out of every $3 they generate is just for-profit businesses now, would you say that it was with good intentions from the prophets and these bishops that the system is kind of turned into just a massive capitalistic business?
No, so Brigham Young, he taught, because Babylon is the money, the mammon, that kind of thing. And he talked about these ladies, and they'd bring these hats in, they're all fancy and everything. And he said, that's worse than a snake bite. And those snake bites back then were pretty deadly. And he says, when they start generating that, look at me and look at this and da-da-da, those are where, like even in the Book of Mormon, it talked about the happiest people ever. And they were living united, all things common. Mm-hmm. And then something broke up, and then they weren't living it anymore. And that's when all the happiness ended. Mm-hmm. And so this is so pivotal to understand. Brigham even taught, he says, I fear in the last days the leaders of this church will lead our people even unto the brink of hell. Mm. And so here we are. Yeah. And what's hell? Hell was the mammon, the world, the worldliness, the all those things. And if you look at that scripture again, which was Hugh Nibley's favorite, this Doctrine and Covenants 70:14, it says, the abundance of the manifestations shall be withheld if you don't have all things in common. Hmm. And so I taught seership, I taught all these things. And the first question is, how come we can't do it today? How come we, where's your heart? Hmm. And I'd sit the lady down and I'd say, just look at your heart. It's not that you have to live United Order, but in your mind, could you or would you, and imagine that. Mm. And she couldn't do it. Finally, I said, okay, I tried everything. And finally, I said, okay, imagine that you're like in Dances with Wolves.
Best movie ever, Kevin Kraut.
And you're living with the Indians, and a guy goes out and hunts the buffalo and brings the buffalo back, and everybody shares in the buffalo, right? But in the white man world, we go buy an extra fridge and throw more meat into it for ourselves. Mm-hmm. We don't share with our neighbors or do anything. And so I said, now you understand. And so she kind of caught the drift of how that works, because now you're worried about other people. Mm. And it becomes not all about you. Mm-hmm. And once it becomes about you only, that's the selfishness that breaks down everything.
Jeez. You know what this reminds me of right now? That refrigerator, that second refrigerator. So in the Levitical tithe system, back in the day in the temple, the Levites would be working. I would bring an animal, tithe it. God wanted what from the animal? Yahweh wanted what from that animal? The fat.
Yeah.
He wanted, so you would cut the fat out. And I'm a big hunter, so I know how to, I break a lot of animals down. And so when you look at these beautiful fat stores on these animals, you're like, this animal took the whole summer and fall to pack on this fat just to survive the next season. And then what does God demand of that animal? The fat. He doesn't want the meat, doesn't want the bones or the sinew or the cartilage. He goes, burn the fat to me because it's sweet smelling aroma. And then you, as the Levite would boil your tithe, he would take one of the back hindquarters and you'd get the rest to go eat with your family. But why did God want the fat? It was those stores. God didn't say, hey, store up things, store up the rest of that bison in another freezer so you can survive 2 years without my help or without the help of your brothers and sisters. Does that make sense? It's like, yeah. I see it going all the way back to the Mosaic tithes or Mosaic laws coming off Mount Sinai. Like that's God, Yahweh back then was saying, hey, don't store up for yourself.
Well, a better example of that is manna. Mm. Because here we have manna that comes down and God's taking care of them. Mm-hmm. And then what do they want to do with it?
Store it. Yeah.
And so it's okay, but I want you to my dad served he was the last Mormon to go without purser script for a full 2 years.
Without what? Sorry.
Without purser script.
What is that?
That means you go without money and you just go depend on the people.
Script. Like, okay, gotcha.
Yeah. Now, and there's a whole bunch of neat things about this. If you go back, there was a lady that Wilford Woodruff actually married after the manifesto. Here's Wilford Woodruff, president of the church, tells everybody quit living polygamy, and then he turns around and marries another gal, Madam Mountford, and she gave she was from Palestine. She came here, and so she gave these lectures in here in the Mormon thing, and it was Jesus in his homeland, and also the King David story and different things. And so she's telling all about what purse and the script are part of in the shepherd world. Mm. And when you understand these, we need to do a whole dialogue on that, because once you understand this, everything starts making sense of what the scriptures talk about once you understand the shepherds and what they were doing. But let's see, where was I going with that?
We were talking about I was just talking about the fat offering.
Yeah, and the manna.
And then you said the manna. Yeah, and I totally agree. Yahweh always wanted the Israelites to
depend.
To depend on him.
So that's why I was telling about without prescript, because my dad went out and he says, now think about it. You go out there as a missionary and you don't have any money and you don't have anything and you're depending on the people. You better be praying. And they prayed a lot. And he says, there was never a time, if we prayed and we did what we needed, there was never a time we slept out. There was always somebody that came by. And he says, I had these shoes one time, and they were just beat up. You know, I was putting cardboard in the bottom of the feet and everything, and my companion goes, those things are hideous. You need to get some decent things. He says, yeah, let's ask the Lord. So he knelt down on the street corner. He just knelt down, both of them right there, and prayed. And that was one thing they did. They said, the more we prayed in public, the more people saw us and knew we were praying. And he said this prayer, and this guy drives up and he goes, hey, elders, I have all this stuff in the back that I'm hauling off to Salvation Army. Is there anything you want? And my dad went over there and he goes, oh man, I'll take those shoes. Most expensive shoes ever. The best build, I don't know, I can't remember the name of them, but my dad said, and they were perfect for my feet. And he says, you know, it's so weird. I bought those and I never, ever used them. And I thought maybe somebody could use those, so I threw them in there. And so Dad got his shoes.
Yeah.
You know?
Power of prayer is
power of prayer.
Real. Going back to when I was 16, I'm alive today because of the power of prayer.
Right.
Yeah, I was life flighted from Mexico and had a grand mal seizure and brain injury, and and it's all prayer because my family's some of my family's missionaries in Kyiv, Ukraine, and there was missionaries in the Philippines. Like the network was just praying for me, you know. And the doctor was like, "You're a miracle." 2 weeks later, he's like, "I don't know how you're walking out of this hospital, but see you later." And prayer's a real thing.
Yep.
So what is your take then? And I love the fact that Ensign Peak is a mountain. I never knew that. What is your take on the current LDS system? Their net assets are $300 billion. You know, they're making anywhere from 20 to 30 billion a year in interest on their money. So they don't need tithe money from its members. It could run in perpetuity and fund the global church and also be the largest humanitarian organization in the world while still just growing in perpetuity now. Like, I see that as, and this is just my opinion because I'm not LDS. They lied on federal forms 650,000 times, but they created a system, and I believe God always uses things for his good, that's so profound and so cash heavy that they could change the world. And I see that as a good thing. Like, I would love to sit down with leadership at Ensign one day and be like, hey, like, let's do something with, you give a little bit, but you're great marketing, like really change the world. Like, what do you think of the system that the core has built?
Okay, so the system is corrupt. Okay. And where some of that started was 1890, but then another thing that John Taylor prophesied, he said, our seventh president of this church will put our people both in financial and spiritual bondage. And that was Heber J. Grant.
What year?
And I can't remember the years.
Like
30s.
30s.
And he was president of the church for 20 years. It seems like something
so
like that.
This guy prophesied that the church would put its people in spiritual and in financial bondage
by this president of the church. Heber J. Grant, his own mother knew he'd be president of the church. She was that spiritual. And she was trying to raise this kid and teach him proper principles and do everything. And she came in one day and she says, you're going to be president of this church. You better darn well do the right thing. And he goes, Mom, I don't want to be president of this church. I want to be a multimillionaire and have a big business. That was Heber J. Grant. Heber J. Grant mortgaged the Salt Lake Temple to the Rockefellers.
Whoa.
It is still, my dad discovered this and published it, and it is still owned. Well, we thought it was Chase, but I had a friend that was a real estate tycoon, and he really knew how to go in to find this stuff. And he spent days in the archives trying to find it, and he finally found it. And he says, it is in J.P. Morgan's hands.
The temple today in Salt Lake is
still owned by J.P. Morgan.
What about the renovations they're doing to it and all that?
Yeah, you know what they're doing? Okay, I'll tell you what they're doing. If you look at their plans, they actually tore out the fountain, which is very sacred to a temple. And then they're putting up flags in the exact order as the United Nations.
Oh.
Whoa.
And I have a friend that was an engineer, and he was in the Salt Lake Temple, and he says, my dad and my grandpa worked in that temple, and he said, I just watched him rip murals, everything out of that temple. It's totally stripped.
Wow.
So all the old symbols, all the old things, all the sacredness of that temple. He says, I literally sat and wept on the porch.
Wow.
This was
seeing what happened.
Interesting period of time, right? Because like you're talking about the banking concept,
Sure.
right?
Absolutely.
Like that happened several years before, but that was the catalyst, if you want to call it. But like you're talking Rockefellers, J.P. Morgan, anything with the Rothschilds and central bank.
Yeah, they're all part of it. Yeah, they're all.
Wow.
Yeah, so they've taken over the church basically. They've got their power that they've done. Now, what's interesting is that, and also back to Brigham Young's statement that I fear lest they're going to leave our people even unto the brink of hell. So hell in the scriptures was mammon, which was money and all the things of this world.
Wait, did you just say hell was mammon?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, keep going. I love it.
Okay. So one of the first things, after having a near death, you start watching other people. And when I had my near death, I came back with all the gifts. I mean, I could look at somebody and I'd tell you everything about them. And that happened once with a waitress. A guy goes, tell me all about her. I says, well, she was raped when she's this old. This happened. She's in rehab. She did this. She did that. I mean, things I would never know. And he goes, I'm her best friend. Nobody would ever know that. And so all the gifts of prophecy, seership. I mean, here's a book called Seers and Seer Stones. And my dad had Joseph Smith's seer stone in our home. And he was giving lectures on this and handing them around. And he turned to me one day and he hands me this little stone. And he goes, I'm looking at it and I hold it. And it went into kind of a visionary state. And he says, well, can you see anything? And I said, yeah. I see my knife that I lost. And Dad, remember this thing? You lost that. This is where that is. And so I started seeing with seership. That's
How old were you at this time?
I was about 6.
Golly.
Yeah. And that's why this KGB guy, I told earlier about.
Which is the former like Russian CIA equivalent for our viewers.
Right.
Yeah.
Or KGB, I mean.
KGB.
And that's why he said that. He said, because this kid was so unique. And I went to a reunion, a class reunion, and there was a girl there named Mickey Follis, and Mickey was brilliant. She was just as sharpest kid. And she said, you were always just kind of a weird kid. You were quiet. You didn't say much. And I said, I grew up in a really weird world. I saw things that people didn't see. I could see through the veil. I could see stuff that a lady came in one time, and I saw everything about her and her past life and how horrible it was. And I was all tucked up, and my mom comes in, and I did ask God at that time to take away that gift, to see the past of people. And the last time I was over on the Vale, I got over there and they're saying, we taught you these things. You get back down, you get this thing done. I'm like, nah, I like it here. I don't want to go home. I don't want to go back. No. You get back down there. And they were chewing me out. It wasn't like Grandma and Grandpa coming in and flowers and nice things. It was like a big chewing out. You get back down, you teach the people. We gave you these gifts. We want you to do this. And I said, please don't make me see their past. I just don't want to see their past. And at one time, I could literally read people's minds. I could hear everything. You know, the movie What Women Want or whatever.
Yeah, with Mel Gibson.
And he's sitting there. I was in the theater, and I'm laughing my guts out. And I'm embarrassing my wife. You know, she's, but don't you see how that's funny? And no. like, oh, okay. Well, I'm different. You know, I just see things different. And anyway, I turned to Mickey and in this time, and I said, oh, like there's two beings next to you, and one they have kimonos on, and one is this color and one is this color. And she said, that's my mother and my grandmother. And my grandmother was, trying to think, it was the emperor of Japan, and his daughter left with the military guy from America, and they hit him out at Dugway.
Wow.
Because nobody goes to Dugway.
Which is where you were born.
Which is where I was born.
I want to get into Dugway and Area 52.
Yeah.
But I want to really break this down and finish this because this prophet said that the church will control it, or what was it?
So Heber J. Grant would do this, and so he mortgaged the temple. He did all this stuff. He did put our people in both spiritual and physical bondage. And so now he owes money, the church owes money to the Rockefellers, to the big bankers, and then, you know, they never really gave the temple back.
So what is the spiritual bondage side? Because I fully see the financial.
Because now we're into Babylon.
You're into the
Now we've crossed that line. If you really read the scriptures and understand things, God is telling us, if you're not going to live all things in common and help each other and do these things. I mean, it's all based on helping others, right? You know, all the parables that Christ teaches is about helping others and the man that's on the path, and you know, it just goes through all the different things.
Lend money without expecting to get it back. Like that, you know, it's very fascinating.
And this is what I call, I don't have a real good word for it, but I call it the secret to spirituality. The secret to spirituality is releasing yourself away from money. Okay, and so now money doesn't matter to you. And God will give you money. I mean, God can give anything to anybody. But what are you going to do with it? You know, it's like, and I get caught in that too, and then I lose my spirituality. And so I know that it's based on that abundance of the manifestations of the Spirit will be withheld if you don't have that in common. And, you know, in Payson the other day, there's a dog that got lost, and it was...
In Payson?
Yeah.
Arizona?
No, Payson, Utah.
Payson, Utah, okay.
Yeah. And they offered $5,000 reward. And I'm like, holy cow, what could we do with $5,000? Let's go find this dog. You know? and so I'm praying, and I'm putting my spiritual energy into it, and something's wrong. And I'm like, what's going on here? Well, then my wife sends me this text, and it was the people saying, they found a couple found our dog and brought it back, but they refused the money. And I went, really? And then so they refused the money, but we're going to donate the $5,000 to charity, and we found out their church, and so we're going to give it to their church and to other people and this and that and whatever. And I went, I wonder why God didn't answer my prayer.
Yeah.
Because look at the difference in me. It was all about me and not, and you know, I was going to do good things with the $5,000, but see, they had a better thing.
Yeah.
They gave it back.
So I'm going to push the envelope here. The LDS Church, and I say this, I'm going to say the incorporated LDS Church terrifies me.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. Because they come in looking like Christ. It's in their name, but they are hyperly capitalistic in their endeavors. I do think they lord it over their people. What was the prophet that made that prophet? John Taylor. I do think they have their people in spiritual bondage and in financial bondage. And if the system isn't reformed, they the church will become one of the largest businesses in the world.
Well, yes. My dad actually knew one of the head accountants of the church. And this is going back 30 years ago. And he said to my dad, the largest corporation this side of the Mississippi is the LDS Church. We had Microsoft. We had all these things going on. I mean, big corporate stuff.
Yeah.
And it was bigger than that.
Mm-hmm.
So it has, but who owns it? I mean, that's where I get to questioning, where's the real ownership?
Mm-hmm.
Is this a church? No, it's a corporation. Mm-hmm. Who owns the corporation? Back to that.
Yeah, the government. Yeah.
Okay, what did Isaiah say? They made a covenant with death and hell.
Mm.
And when you look into that in detail, that means they made a real, actual covenant. It's an actual written contract.
So my assumption is whatever your denomination, whether that be Baptist, Presbyterian, non-denominational, if you take 501c3 tax status from the government, you're basically signing a covenant with the devil.
Correct.
Yeah.
Mic drop.
And that's the whole problem, because I mean the government is really good at pushing these 501s and all becoming a corporate entity and all that kind of stuff.
Well, so I was called by someone at the CIA maybe, 6 months ago now. I can't remember, 8 months ago. It was an unknown number. I never answer unknown numbers, but I answered this call. And he said the conversation was about the 14-point checklist. And the government, it was off of a lawsuit, and a judge back in I'm going to butcher this, the 60s, used the Salvation Army as a benchmark for what is a church in America. Because this church that was being sued, they owned wineries and were selling their wine label. They owned alcohol distilleries and they were selling alcohol. And so some people came together like, this is not a church. This is a liquor store. This is a liquor producing company. And so this judge used the Salvation Army as the benchmark and put them side by side. And they said, hey, you are not a church. Like, you do not get tax exempt status. The judge created 14 points from what he saw or she saw. I can't remember the gender of the judge, but from the Salvation Army that kind of defined what a religion or institution should be, a religious institution. So this allegedly person from the CIA said, what do you know about the 14 points? And I rattled off, 10 minutes of knowledge that I've gained from literally the former head of the IRS, the nonprofit sector of the IRS. I rattled it all off. He's like, great. Okay, you know the basis. But he's like, do you know who built that system and set it in place? And I was like, who? And he's like, the CIA. Because every religion, Islam, Buddhism, Christianity, Hinduism, the United Order of the LDS Church has to climb in this box. And the box is very generic. And then the government can put that box on a shelf. And if it ever needs it or needs to move it, it'll just move it where it needs to go. Mm. And the carrot to get them in that box is tax exemption. And so we've basically created this shell. We've taken the bite out of religion. We've taken the danger of United Order to the federal government away. We've taken the danger of Islam away for the most part. We've taken the danger of Christianity. And whether the political power is right, left, or center at the time, they can pull that box off the shelf and move it wherever they want. And if you try to step out of line, we're going to yank your tax exempt status.
Yep. Cool. Well, I mean, the blacks in the priesthood was one.
Yeah.
When the church, there were lawsuits all over the place about, not giving the blacks the priesthood. And there's a whole bunch of shadow stuff that
let's talk about this and I just pushed the second podcast because I'm like, this is so.
Yeah. Can I take a break for a second?
Yeah, let's take a break.
Yeah. Okay. So we are back from a water and bathroom break, and we are going to get into something very interesting, which is African Americans in the church. And so talk us through that, because this is a sensitive topic and I don't know much on it, but I'm just fascinated with it. So talk us through this.
Well, in the beginning, Joseph Smith had made, they came to him and asked him about priesthood and that kind of thing. And we have several records where, they came and said, well, the black man can have the priesthood, right, Joseph? And he put his head down a little bit and he goes, no, not now. And so they had, because of decisions that they had either in the pre-earth life or their dynamic of where they were at, they weren't supposed to have the priesthood at that time. And I explain it like this. Look, there was the Levites, and they were chosen to, and they were still Israel, and other people were there, and they're holy and they're good and everything else. These priests, these Levites had a certain purpose to do stuff, and they were called and they were selected to do that, and that was a Levitical priesthood, which was different than all the rest. And so the rest may feel a little bit denied, but that was their calling, and so that was kind of how the blacks were. They weren't up to that level at that point, and so so that was how the church went. The dynamic of how that was going. I have all different people's views on that. There's some LDS people that think that the blacks were the chosen one. They were the ones. That's interesting thought. But when it came down to that time when the church gave the blacks the priesthood, it was President Kimball that did that.
And what year was that?
76, I think. 78. I think it's 78. Yeah. And what was happening was there's a lot of lawsuits against the church, and there was all kinds of things happening that put the pressure on the church to give the blacks the priesthood. And I had kind of some interesting stories. There was a LDS General Authority, George P. Lee, and he was thrown out of the church. I don't know if you heard that story or whatever. So he was a Native American. He was a Navajo, and after he got excommunicated, he came right to my dad and visited with my dad and told him all the story about what happened and everything. And
why was he excommunicated?
Well, he was he wrote a letter to him, saying, look, you're going astray, you're doing this. And
he wrote a letter to the church.
Yeah.
Okay.
To the general authorities. And so they didn't really hold an official, so anytime you're excommunicated, there's supposed to be 6 for, 6 against, and then they have a court, and then they go through it, and they decide, and the stake president decides, or whoever. They didn't have any of that. They just walked in and said, George, you're excommunicated.
Wow.
And then give us your church credit card and give us your temple recommend. And he said, in that order, he said.
That's pretty funny. I want your access to the money and then the spiritual side.
Yeah, he brought that up. It was really funny.
Yeah, I find it interesting that the exclusion of African Americans into the priesthood, the line, and I'm going to be the devil's advocate, runs right along cultural lines, right? It's like segregation. In the 60s, you had the riot, like there was serious, when was...
MLK?
No. When did the schools...
As an Alabama case, I think.
Yeah, but it was around that time, right? So to me, the church was more... It seems like the church made that decision based off culture at the time and what was happening in regards to race.
Could be. There's records that go back that, they were Canaanite, that they came through. I have a friend that was, he was at the Bible Belt, and then joined the church. And he goes, no, the Bible Belt was teaching this. I mean, there was laws against blacks marrying whites.
Oh, MLK says, I'm a big advocate of this one line that he says. He says the most... the biggest segregation in race in the U.S. happens on a Sunday morning. And it's true because you always have your black churches and your white churches, right? Yeah, it's like he's like the most segregated time during the week in America is Sunday mornings. And he said that it's I think it still stands today, And I find it interesting. We were at the Tuella Temple, and in the temple before they consecrated it or whatever, we were able to walk through, and they had these murals of Joseph Smith speaking to African Americans and basically preaching to African Americans and then preaching to Native Americans. And I found it interesting that I'm trying not to make judgment on it, but I was like, oh, it's almost like you're like these paintings were capitulating to your past,
right?
Your past mistakes, so to speak.
Well, he did preach a lot to the Native Americans. That was a common thing, but not so much the blacks.
Yeah. So I just found it interesting that as you walked in, this
they're just trying to become more like the world, fit in, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I found it fascinating. Okay, so that's
George. Now George P. Lee told me that he was in the office. He was in the first presidency's office when Jimmy Carter called President Kimball and said, "Okay, today's the day. We put this off long enough. You need to do it now, or you will lose your tax exempt status." About
the race side of things. Wow.
So then they brought in a black man that day and gave him priesthood, which isn't even the order of how the church does it. Because if there's a revelation that's given, then that's presented to the church at conference, and then people vote on it and say, yeah, we want that, we agree with that, or we don't agree with that.
Yeah.
And then by common consent or by that power. So they didn't follow any of that protocol.
I feel like most religions, organized religions today, bow to the whims of culture. And
the powers that be. Yeah.
Yeah, so
the government.
It's fascinating. So when you look at the 14-point checklist, the Hells Angels are registered as a church. The Hells Angels is the biker gang, or the biker club.
Right.
And morals aside, I look at the Hells Angels, and one of my arguments is I actually tip my hat to them. They're almost more of a true religion than most religions today, because they will live for their creed, they will die for the creed. The brotherhood is above all else. And I'm like, they're almost more religious than most religious people.
Sure.
Because they will live and die to their creed, government be damned,
But once again, that goes back to brotherhood. And so the true brotherhood in any organization is where the power is.
Masonry.
So, exactly. And so you go back, and Masonry had a good side and a bad side. Okay, and there's good Masonic lodges, and there were really bad Masonic lodges.
Is Masonry? I've heard chatter that Masonry is intertwined with the LDS Church.
Very deep. Let's
go down that rabbit hole for a sec.
Well, Joseph Smith was a Mason. George Washington was a Mason. I started studying and knew a lot of Masons in my life, and and the doctrines and the tenets of what they're teaching go back to the original truths that were found and brought out in King Solomon's temple. And so there's a lot of things that were good about that, and there were a lot of things that were bad about that.
Wait, so Masonry dates back to Solomon's temple?
Correct.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, That's why they call them Masons. They were the Masons that discovered the truths are hidden in the temple, underneath the temple. And there's all kinds of stuff about this.
Any good ones that you know of?
Any good?
Well, just like what was discovered there.
Oh, okay. So the stories go back to the rings of Solomon, and so there was one ring that, and the story is that there's a guy working on the temple, and they're trying to figure out, what's wrong with this guy because he's skinny and all this, and he says there's this demon that comes and he takes my money every time, and Solomon says, here, take this ring, and when you see him, you throw that at him, and then he'll be under your power, and bring him to me. And so he brings him to him, and and then Solomon captures this demon, and then he helps build the temple by his powers. And so there were also 3 rings. That's a whole nother story. And so actually you look at Tolkien's whole Lord of the Rings.
Oh, yeah.
And it goes back to this whole story. The whole thing is all, it's why people kind of recognize it and go, oh, that's kind of interesting, And so I actually helped a gentleman get a book published called The Widow's Son, The Esoteric History of Joseph Smith. And so he goes into the deep Masonry, Rosicrucianism, it's all kind of creepy and dark. You know, you look at some of that, but in reality, the old versions of that weren't. And I'll kind of tell you a little story, but I don't want to go into too much depth because I was studying about the dark side of that aspect, and you know, and that's what Masonry is about, right? White and black, you know, and all this. And so I got a friend, I was talking to him about it, and he says, "Oh, there's a guy, I'm gonna have him call you." And so he called me, and this is the conversation. He said, "Okay, don't ask my name, don't ask me anything. I'm just gonna give you information, okay?" And I says, "Okay, I'm listening." One of those 111, 111, 11111. Okay, they're all ones. That's what come up on my phone.
Wow. Jeez.
And I was going, okay, this is military or somebody knows something. And so he calls and he says, so I was part of a lodge back east, and I didn't know anything about religion or anything. I was just a really good archivist, and I got into deep records, and I was down in the bottom of this big, huge lodge helping them in their archives. And I ran across a paper, and it said that lodge had killed the last of the 2 White Lodge members, and that was Joseph and Hiram Smith. And he went, you know, I've never had any real good feelings in this lodge. Maybe these 2 guys were good. And so he comes up out of the lodge and he walks out and he goes, "Does anybody know who Joseph and Hiram Smith is?" And he said it was like a pin drop. It was just silent. And he says, and I got out of there and never went back.
Wow.
And then I went and looked up who Joseph and Hiram was, and they joined the church. And then I came out west, and I was part of the church, and I was an archivist. And he says he's down at working the archives and doing different things and whatever. And then he finds out that the Dark Lodge had pretty much engulfed the church. So the Dark Lodge is now infiltrated and kind of taken over things. Not all the way, but he said it was scary enough that I left the LDS church. And then I went up to...
Because how were they killed?
Well, my belief is that there was a mob, but it was also a Masonic killing.
Okay.
You know.
Because were they shot?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I just couldn't remember how they were killed.
Yeah. And Joseph actually yelled out the window, "Is there no help for the widow's son?" Which means I'm calling to my Mason brothers to help me. Nobody helped him.
I've heard that before. I heard that there's a specific line if you're about to die that you yell out.
Yep.
If you're a Mason, and other Masons have to, per the code or whatever, respond.
Yes.
And no one responded.
No one responded. Yeah. Yeah. And he was also, according to this book, The Widow's Son, he was also the Rosicrucian head. He was the head of the Rosicrucians. Now, the Rosicrucians are interesting because they go back into history in Egypt and go back to that type of stuff that the Egyptians had, which is why Hugh Nibley was BYU professor, but he was a scholar in Egyptology because he felt that Mormonism with Pearl of Great Price and all that kind of connected back with those people. And once again, you know, if they killed Joseph and he was head of the Rosicrucians, I mean, that's huge. And I think the Rosicrucians are probably more accurate with some of their information, and they teach a lot of different doctrines that are pretty good.
I've heard that at the temple in Salt Lake, there's Masonic symbols in there.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the actual garment is
masonry,
Mason, oriented.
And that crosses also. I mean, it's fascinating that there's few things that cross political lines. That brotherhood, right?
Yeah.
And religious lines.
Right. Right. And so
that idea of a tribe, tribe above all.
So when I saw in the future Zion and the people there, and I saw the brotherhood that was there, and I went to Hugh Nibley and told him, we talked a lot, and I went and talked to him about this vision I had of the future and Zion and the people. And I said, we were traveling in the wilderness and we had teepees. And he jumps out of his seat and he's literally just excited. And he goes, teepees, don't you see? He says, that's nomadic. The people will be nomadic, will be like a tribe, kind of like Israel leaving Egypt, and coming out. And Mormonism talks about one likened to Moses that will come and lead the people. And so I think that's somebody inside, because Moses was he was raised both in the good and the bad. And he was bad, and most of the Israelites, they hated Moses because he was part of the big bad guys on the top. But then he turned, and I think somebody's going to turn.
Interesting. So do you know, are there known Masons today, right? Like when you look at the power of the religious structures across the world, you look at the power of the political structures of the world. Do you know some of the names of who are Masons today?
Yeah, a few. Yeah.
Is that something that can be shared?
Probably not. I'm a little nervous of that.
Yeah, I would be as well.
Understand.
But like this guy, he was scared. He left and he went away. And then my friend introduced him to my dad's works. And then he said, I'm calling you out of respect for your father. And he brought me back to the old religion, the old gospel. And I'm just independent. I just don't go to church. I don't do this.
Which is those three: United Order. Well, polygamy, I feel like, isn't a tenant, or is it?
It's there, yeah.
Because are you a polygamist?
Well, you don't ask those questions to people like that.
Sorry, I didn't know that. You keep on saying wife, so I don't know. I'm like, maybe it's one.
Yeah.
Goes to show I'm not an LDS. I'm not a member of the church.
Well, especially in Utah, because Utah just has laws against it and all that type of stuff.
Oh, okay. Then I respect that.
Nobody else cares.
Okay, so but like, would you consider polygamy a tenet of the old faith?
Yes.
Okay, like a literal legal tenet.
It's a literal and there's different views now, because now the people are saying, I call them Emmaites, the ones back east. And Emma hated polygamy at some point, and so and there's a whole nother branch of Mormonism that went through Emma's line. And then it came here, it's Brighamites, and then I call them the Emmaites. Yeah. And I nickname a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
I call the church here the Rocky Mountain Vatican.
And one of our sayings is, one of my conclusions in the show is there's 400,000 registered churches, religious organizations in the U.S., Christian organizations. I say there's 400,000 mini Vaticans in the U.S.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, there you go.
And the LDS Church is the biggest Vatican in the U.S.
At least in the Rocky Mountains.
Yeah. Oh, no. I mean, it's the wealthiest religion in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, so and I love this idea that history repeats itself, right?
Yes. And
so you look at the Reformation in the 1500s, and you look what the brotherhood, I'll call it. Well, there's two different brotherhoods. Now that I'm speaking Masonic, you have the white and the black. So the common man was fighting against the powers of the Vatican, and they were just, Martin Luther's 95 Theses. There's a couple very specific numbers that I'm really interested in, but people were just tired of the power being lorded over them, and so they tore that down. The New World is being discovered at that time. People are coming over, and as we push west, might be your TP analogy, in Zion, but as people pushed west, there was freedom in that, because you weren't building things. We weren't building a temple, right? The temple was mobile, going back to Israel, and the temple was mobile, pushing west, so no one cared to build institutions. They had the king, people had the King James at that point. They were reading scripture in a group, and they were just pushing west. So there's no need to accumulate things, because when you accumulate things, you can't move very fast, right? That's why SEAL teams are so aggressive, because they're small and compact and they can move quick. So you move west, you make it to the West Coast, and boom, all of a sudden we got to start building cities. And what happens? That same structure from Constantine to the Reformation starts popping up again. and those same buildings are being built. And what do you need? You need order, and you need layers, and you need hierarchy and authority. And flash forward another 700 years, and boom, we got. I love that you call it the Vatican, man, because now we just have 400,000 mini Vaticans, and some are tiny, and some are the LDS Church, but it's the same exact structure, institutional structure. So
yeah, Rocky Mountain Vatican. Yeah,
I love it.
So this guy, he finishes up and he says, out of respect for your father and all the old religion, and I call it the old religion on my YouTubes or other, I wanted you to know that there is a dark side and there is a light side. And the light side, they believed that they'd gotten rid of the two leftovers of that light side. It kind of feasibly seems to me that there's always a dark side and always a light side, even in seer stones. Joseph, there was 2 seer stones that were brought to Joseph called the Shemezer stones. I think they came from India or something, and they put him down and they said these words and they charged and lit up, and Joseph's looking at him and he said, "These are the clearest seer stones I've ever seen." And he claimed to have seen through the Urim and Thummim, which was God's Urim and Thummim, but these are clearer than that. And he says, however, they're dedicated to Satan. Take them out and destroy them. And so they took them out and destroyed them. And so you have to look, this seer stone's is better than this, but it happened to be dedicated to the devil. And so we have to look at, where are we dedicating the church today? What are we doing as a people? Are we part of the devil's portion here, or are we part of the God's portion here? And there's a little bit of gray area there. There's mixtures, but we have to separate ourselves from those and say, this is where I'm going to try and be. Even if it's just mentally. Because like I said with that woman, if you can mentally believe that you're living United Order, or you have that in you, those great spiritual manifestations will come. They will come to you.
All I'm thinking about is Revelation right now, and it comes looking cloaked as Christ and looking, Revelations, cloaked as Christ and sounding like Christ, but it is not Christ. Yeah. So, Dallin, you said there was a couple questions you had. What are those?
So just kind of so we mentioned how like the LDS Church had like a whiskey distillery. I heard they had like a sugar monopoly at one point in time. A lot of like comments and like rebuttals we've been getting from the LDS community, especially on our last post, was just like, oh, like this like business aspect of the LDS Church is new. Like it wasn't like that before, So do you feel like the stuff that Heber J. Grant did and all those like kind of set the playing field for what the church is doing now?
Yeah, because he started teaching. In the Mormon culture, in the Book of Mormon, it says that when the people became righteous, they'd be blessed. And we see this mixed flavor that doesn't add up. Where that blessed means that you have accumulated a lot of wealth. And I talked to some different preachers, and they're all saying the same thing. Gee, not long ago, it was all about miracles and helping people and family all this and dynasty and family and all this, and now the preaching is Jesus will give you great wealth.
Well, that's because we live in a capitalist nation. So it mirrors society.
And so what happened is the gospel changed to money. And now I pray that I get money and I want more money and and this and that. And you can see that in the teachings of the Baptists and others. We have that. And it used to not be that way. And so with that cultural change, that's where Heber J. Grant made the big, huge move, was that he wanted the money, he wanted wealth, he wanted those things, and he taught the people the same. And so there's all these breakdowns where we began to get more money and accumulate more money and want more money, and I even grew up in the culture, and so I was going to be a rich, real estate tycoon, and God goes, no, that's not the direction. Whack, So I had to go down a whole different channel. But that's what happened. That was the time frame. Now you mentioned that the LDS Church had a winery, a distillery, and all this. In the early culture, drunkenness was forbidden, but not alcohol. Okay, and it was 3 things. Okay, wine, beer, and mead. Okay, now I have a friend who's a chemist at Dugway, and
I got to get into Dugway in a minute.
And he's not just a chemist, but he's the guy that blows things up. So I got to go out.
Yeah.
And we went clear past Ditto, which my dad used to say, we'll never get past that, and I got way out there and, got to watch him blow up stuff. It's pretty interesting. But he's in this chemistry. He came in one day and there was a guy, we were working with a cadaver, and he was in his class, and he said, okay, guys, see this artery? This artery right here that's all plugged up and there's hardly anything there came from a stake president. And this artery over here came from a wino who drank wine all the time and got hit by a car. They both died about the same time. And isn't this strange how the wino had nothing in his veins, but yet this did? And so he started studying this out, and he found out in chemistry, when you take natural type of grapes and they have that outer shell and that natural stuff goes in, it will clean your arteries. Okay, and there's people right now that I have friends that say, I had a bad heart and I started drinking wine a little bit here and there, and it cleaned out my arteries and lived longer. Okay.
Jarvis talks about that with communion.
Yeah.
It was a specific wine.
Correct.
That you had to take, not just like wine or grape juice, but it was a cleansing wine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of nasty tasting, but
yeah.
And so my wife's grandmother, she lived to be forever, and she had at 50, she had a heart attack or had a bad thing, and it was a stake president who was her doctor, and he prescribed this particular wine. And it cleared her arteries right out. And when she died, she was like the heart of a young person. Okay. And so what he found was that if it's naturally made, beer, mead, and wine, then it's beneficial. But when it's distilled, the distilling process changes the chemistry of it, and it's bad for you. So his claim was, if you're drinking, heavy distilled whiskey and other things, it's not that good for you. And so when the the whole, what was the alcohol thing? They called it prohibition.
Yeah.
So when the prohibition happened, that was around Heber J. Grant's time, and so Heber J. Grant put the kibosh on beer, meat, and wine, and now we stay away from that, and it's forbidden, and all that kind of stuff. But it wasn't in the beginning. Joseph Smith, Brigham Young, John Taylor, all the leaders up until Heber J. Grant's time, which is a pivotal point in Mormonism.
Yeah,
Everything started cracking. Everything changed. He went through. My dad showed me in books that Heber J. Grant went in and started changing and altering Party P. Pratt's books, other things. They're not even the same books. That's how this changed. You see, we're going through that change. So he was one of the, in my opinion, he was one of the big bankers' boys. And he even admitted he wasn't that spiritual.
So I've got Leviticus 26 up. So you talk about, today we see blessings as money, and we always pray for wealth. But so most prosperity gospel preachers in particular will preach Malachi 3:10. Basically bring your money into the storehouse, and I'm going to rain down upon you blessings that you'll never know or never fathom. And so prosperity preachers will say those blessings are financial. You bless Dallin, I'm going to give you a Ferrari. It's all these silly blessings. But what people don't realize is those blessings are listed in Leviticus that Malachi was referencing. And so Leviticus 26:1, it says, if you walk in my statutes and observe my commandments and do them, then I will give you your rains in their season. The land shall yield its increase. The trees of the field shall yield their fruit. Your threshing shall last to the time of the grape harvest, and you shall eat your bread to the full and dwell in your land securely. I will give you peace in your land. You shall lie down and you shall not be afraid. I will remove harmful beasts from your land, and the sword shall not go through your land. You shall chase your enemies, and they shall fall before your sword. 5 of you shall chase 100, and 100 of you shall chase 10,000, and your enemies shall fall before you by the sword. I will turn you and make you fruitful and multiply, and you will confirm my covenant with you. You shall eat old store long kept, and you shall clear out the old to make way for new. So it's very
interesting.
That is it. Basically saying I'll give you peace and rain. Now there's a curse side to this. If you will not listen to me and you will not do all these commandments, if you spurn my statutes, if your soul abhors my rules, so that you will not do all my commandments and break my covenant, then I will do this to you. I will visit you with panic, with wasting disease and fever that consumes the eyes and makes the heart ache. You shall sow your seed in vain, for your enemies shall eat it. I will set my face against you, and you shall see, and you shall be struck down before your enemies. Those who hate you shall rule over you, and you shall flee when no one pursues you. And it keeps going. But we've taken that blessing in Malachi 3 and we go, oh, it's money. And it has nothing to do with money. It feels very, what did you call it? The union, you had the polygamy, Council of 50, and then the
United Order?
United Order. It sounds like a blessing is similar to United Order, where there's peace in your region, where you'd go without want, whether that be spiritual, health, food, whatever. But we've simplified it or dumbed it down to wealth and money.
Yeah.
And the LDS Church is running in that same vein, I feel.
But if you're God's middleman, that's what you would say. Exactly.
So that's a good question too. Or do we want to get into Duggard?
Oh, Dugway?
Dugway.
It's kind of Dugway.
Okay, so we were standing outside before this podcast, and Kevin just I wouldn't call it haphazardly, just very gently just says, oh, Area 52. And Chris and my ears both perked up because we were like, wait, Area 52? So what is Dugway?
So Dugway was a deep military base and still is. It's a testing range. When they created the atom bomb, it was set off small ones there. That went over to Willa Hill Air Force Base. Those were where, Einstein and several others, whom I've met, and some were people that don't even know, people don't even know who they are. I met the guy that actually dropped the bombs on Hiroshima.
Wow.
That was quite interesting. And so there's a lot of famous people that were out there at Dugway.
So Dugway is northwest Utah, just to give people
kind of northwest.
Yeah,
yep.
Just to give people a location.
Right.
So you said it's Area 52, and you said Area 51 is a decoy.
Yes.
Explain what you mean by that.
Well, Area 51's right off the freeway. I mean, and people go there, and they would see things, and there was stuff that happened there, but nothing like Dugway.
When you say things happened there,
well, like they had flying saucers there. Mm-hmm. They had that kind of thing. Let me tell you a story, kind of put things into perspective. So me and my buddy Kevin Jenkins were out there one day, and we're taking the flag down at the elementary school. And we look up to take the flag down to make sure it doesn't, sometimes it gets wrapped up and whatnot. So we're doing that, both watching. And all of a sudden, here comes 2 flying saucers right above us.
At Dugway.
Not right above us, but, above us.
Yeah.
And we're like this, sitting here looking at these things, and now all of a sudden they go off on a 45. And it freaks us out. I mean, we drop the flag. We go running home. The aliens are coming, and we're running in and we're hiding under the beds and all this. And my dad happened to be home that day early, and he comes in. What's going on? What are you boys doing? What's happening? Because, Dugway, anything could happen at Dugway. I mean, when I grew up as a kid, training as a young kid was, okay, you kids if you see an aircraft go over like this, you hit the ground and you put your hand over your ear.
Were they loud?
Oh, yeah, because if they go by, you don't hear them for a while, and then it's kind of a sonic boom hits, and then it'll just. And I said, well, why do we do like this when it just go like this? And she says, okay, the one ear that's on the ground, you'll save your hearing, but the other one you probably won't. So you'll probably lose that ear.
Wow.
As a kid, we're being taught this stuff. Well, that happened to us. Me and my buddies out there one day, and there's this plane, and
like a standard fighter
all
jet.
This crazy, he's coming. I think it was an F-16. He's coming flying over, and he flies over, and you don't see or hear it, and then all of a sudden, bam! That thing hit, and all the windows not all the windows, but most of the windows in the school just break out, and we're sitting there, and I'm going, oh, I'm going to lose my ear, and we stood up because we didn't go into the class after we were supposed to, so we were outside. And so we got back in there, and I couldn't hear for weeks or months or something out of this ear. And they were doing tests and other stuff. And they said, your ear's going to be fine. You're okay. And
so those flying saucers, did they look like they were made out of steel or what?
Yeah, so then we go running home, and then my dad comes running, and he sits down, and he says, okay, what's happening? Because he's nervous. He saw something. And we said, well, there's these 2 flying saucers that flew over us, and he just sat down, and he goes, okay, were they gray or were they silver? Did they have lights? Did they not have lights? Did they come to a fast stop, or did they kind of come to a slow stop? Did they do this? He finished up everything, and then he leans back in his chair like this, and he goes, okay, those were ours.
Whoa.
Wow.
Okay, so.
And what did your dad do at this time?
He was a professional photographer. He was one of their top guys, and then he had a high classification. So he actually told me one time, he says, I'm microfilming film right now, the archiving, that the President of the United States does not have access to.
Wow. Whoa. And who's the president at that time? What year was this?
Nixon.
Nixon
around that
70s.
So Area 52, you got flying saucers. Your dad says, through a series of questions, basically is trying to figure out if it's ours, if it's one of our aircraft, or if it's something else's aircraft.
Yeah, somebody else's. Which could have been Russian or German. We don't know.
Or alien.
Yeah. He fully, acknowledged that there's alien type things going on.
Your dad fully acknowledged?
Yeah, there's stuff happening.
Were there things that were seen at Dugway that would lend to that, like actual alien sightings, physical?
Yeah, we had a lot of people had experiences, and even myself. There were weird things that happened at Dugway, really creepy stuff. Yeah.
Could the fact that you're so visionary and live in dream states a lot, could that be because you grew up on Dugway and something kind of
maybe
fed you or rubbed off on you, so to speak?
Could be that, some of that. I think my ancestors had those gifts, though. My mother and I psychically talked to each other. She'd say, you need to be home. You need to come home. And I tell this story on my mission. I'm riding my bike, and I go by this place, and this lady's voice pops in my head, and it says, come back, teach me the rest of the gospel. And I go, what? The rest of the gospel? And I said, they tell him this to my companion, and he understood, but he was a little bit weirded out by that. And he goes, let's go back. So we go back, knock on the door. We come in, we sit down, and the lady was LDS, but had fallen kind of away and then come back. So she wanted to hear the rest of the gospel. And so I'm talking to her, and she turns to my companion and goes, which one of you two got my call? Out to you. And he says, oh, he did. Oh, then you have the gift. Oh, okay. And so she starts talking to me and doing things. And then like one day we're out doing something, and I got this call from her, and she says, come by tonight at 6:00 sharp. And I was like, okay, we'll be there. Mental.
This is all like telepathy.
Mind to mind.
Yeah.
Okay. And on the other side of the veil, where I've had experiences with angels or other things, it's all mind to mind. Okay. And so I said, okay, we'll be there. And then we were a little bit late because of my companion. But anyway, you got there 5 minutes after or something, and she opens the door and goes, you're 5 minutes late.
That's pretty funny.
And my companion goes, you guys are weird.
That's awesome.
And so she actually, I'm driving down the road one day, and all of a sudden I felt her spirit next to me. And I turned, and I couldn't see her, and I said, is this Sister Campbell? And she goes, yes, this is Sister Campbell. And she said, I want you to know I've passed on. And I've gotten permission to come and thank you for saving me, for coming and rescuing me, type thing. And I said, oh, I'm going to miss you. And she said, yes, I know. And that's why I got permission to come and do this. And I says, okay. And she said, but we'll talk soon someday. Goodbye. And then she left. And I could feel her spirit leave. I could feel everything. And I looked at the clock on the car, and it was 10 after 10. And I turned to my companion and says, Sister Campbell just died. She just came here. I felt her. And I said, it's 10 after 10. Let's see what happens. And he goes, okay. So then I called her daughter, and I said, she came to me, and she told me she'd pass. What time did she pass? It was 10 after 10.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting?
That's crazy. Wow. Like, this conversation has been incredible. If you could put, because we are the religion business, and we're looking at business models built on top of faiths, what would your conclusion be? Well, it wouldn't be a conclusion. What would your summation be on the direction of the incorporated LDS church right now?
Falling off a cliff. We're going down. We're getting taken over is what's happening.
Yeah.
I think that the Rockefellers are coming here. I think they're going to make the United Nations here. They already took over the Salt Palace when they came.
Wow.
It's the first time they've ever been anywhere other than New York. And they came to the Salt Palace, and friends went up there, and they said, this is domain of the United Nations. Don't come here.
And does that link to the Rothschilds as well?
Yeah,
too?
and so somehow the state of Utah gave to the United Nations the Salt Palace. That's what we've heard. So,
Wait, what?
yeah. And so now that's a domain. My friend went there, and they says, you can't come here. It's private property. How could it be private property? It's, taxpayers' money from Salt Lake and all this. And nope. It's no longer that. And so,
Wow.
And that's why I'm saying here's the LDS temple. It's their own property now. And they're putting those flags around. They're doing all this kind of stuff. And I'm going. And there's a whole bunch. I have a friend that's really into this, and he's studied out and found newsprint and other things that show things are happening in Salt Lake City. And Brigham Young made a statement that it would be one of the most corrupt cities in the last days.
Wow.
When did he say that?
Back in the day.
Wow.
He also said that, and John Tater as well, they both had a premonition that when all the houses get down to where the point of the mountain is, that's going to be close to the time that this happens, that things come about. And
wow.
And here's an interesting one, and I want to tell this story because there was a man at Dugway. His name was Volney Wallace. He was a scientist out there. He'd grow carrots about this big. My brother brought one home one time, and I go, "Where'd you get that?" "Out in the desert." You know, I'm like, how would a carrot be in the desert? You know, he's always playing around. But anyway, so Volney one day, he saw that I really loved rocks. And he told my mom, he says, he really wants to go see Topaz Mountain. Let's go, you know. And so I went out and I found a really expensive, rare one and gave it to him. And I was talking to him, and he seemed like he knew things, you know, kind of like this Tom guy that I went to Alaska with. And I said, "When's Jesus coming?" And he sat there for a while, and he said, "That's an interesting question." And he said, "Jesus will come about the time that diamonds are found in Utah." And why not? We have the coal, we have emeralds, we have topaz. I mean, you know, it's right there. It's got to be somewhere.
You want to know what's interesting? And I'm going to go back to Jarvis. The 4 rocks of the size of the tent. Was it a rock per side of it was stone.
Symbol.
Was it a stone per tribe?
Oh, that I told about that. Yeah.
Oh,
So
did you?
Yeah.
Well, no, didn't Jarvis was talking about rocks too.
He did mention something about rocks.
He
but I
said
don't know.
diamonds, topaz. There was stones
Yeah.
that he was referencing. We got to go back and talk to Jarvis about that.
Yeah. So the ephod that's seer stones. Okay. And
On the Levitical.
yeah,
Yeah.
priest, and so they're all seer stones that represent each tribe.
Yeah.
And so guess which tribe Judah was?
Diamond.
What stone? Diamond. Yeah.
Jeez.
So it's jewelry
yeah.
after Judah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Jarvis was mentioning, we got to talk to Jarvis because he was mentioning the stones too.
He just reached out, so yeah, we'll get a call.
Yeah. This is such a fascinating conversation because you
That'd be
have
fun.
Christians of different faiths or different denominations, but they're all talking about the same type of thing, you know, if you really understand history and
Yeah.
it's fascinating. Okay, well, the LDS Church is falling off a cliff.
Yeah.
All organized religion in the U.S. is falling off a cliff.
Now, I haven't mentioned, but there's another book, another story here that's it's a whole branch of Mormonism that was kind of outside it. And this was John H. Coyle's Relief Mine, okay? So John Coyle was a bishop in the LDS Church, and he claimed that 2 of the 3 Nephites came to him and told him about this mine that was set up generations ago by the Nephites for the last days. And that it contained, you know, gold, coins, gold this, and itself, there was a lot of gold there. So there's a lot of important stuff that's inside that. And so that in and of itself was a whole story of because he got excommunicated but yet his mission president was J. Golden Kimball. Now J. Golden Kimball in the Mormon religion was the swearing apostle, they called him. He'd get up and swear. And, you know, he's an old
Thankfully, it's not
kind
just
of
me.
rough rider. And he was C. Kimball's descendant, and so, you know, he had some clout. He even said, the only reason why I'm here is because my dad was, you know, and he was funnier than heck. I mean, his talks were just, everybody would laugh at this guy. He was so funny. And I met a church historian named Michael Quinn. Have you heard of Michael Quinn? Mm-mm. So Michael Quinn had, his books would be half of the book, and then the rest of it, you know, the other half would be quotes or actual places where he footnoted, you know, and all this. I mean, he was just, nobody ever questioned Michael Quinn. And he did a presentation when it first came to Utah from Arizona back up here. My dad takes me up to this. This is really an important event. It's a Mormon History Association. and it's all about all the after the manifesto, all the general authorities that had wives that took other wives. So they didn't believe when they did this manifesto, they were trying to beat the devil at his own game, and they were trying to turn around and become state. And then after they became a state, then they could make polygamy and united order and all these things legal again. But this is the only state in the Union that as soon as we got that, the government ordered, so we never got to vote on our governor and our this and our that. They were all, you're going to have this guy, and he's going to do this, and he's going to make you do that. And so we didn't even get to vote on anything. It was just crazy.
When Utah became a state.
Became a state.
I've heard a little bit about that, yeah.
Yeah, it was terrible. Oh, it was awful. And so Michael Quinn gets up, and he starts showing all these different wives of these guys and all the different things that happen. And they're all like, wow, and there were men in the audience. You could tell. One guy raised his hand, and he was quite the scholar, and he said, well, Michael, how do you get that thing? And he goes, well, I got 72 different references here.
Jeez.
And he's like, and nobody questions Mike because he was so thorough, and so he wrote a book called Early Mormonism and the Magic Worldview. Yeah. So it talks about magic, talks about masonry, talks about how it's incorporated, the rod, so the rod was a thing that the Mormons used in the beginning, and they call that Aaron's rod.
Yeah, I was going to say, is that similar to Aaron's rod? Yeah.
And so...
Was it budded?
They said that a willow that was budded or a living branch worked better than a dead branch, or even a wire or that kind of stuff. I mean, heck, I have a friend and he's an expert at this stuff.
Do you guys have the Ark of the Covenant?
Yeah, we actually, the LDS Church, I believe, had the Ark of the Covenant, and it was in Manti at one time. Where it's at,
no one knows where it's at. I think you guys might have it someplace.
They had the this guy that wrote the Widow's Son. They wrote a book about Arkansas, and that there was an ark there, and that's why they called it Arkansas. And it had lightning in the thing and all the stuff that had on it. And okay, let me go back to a story that this gentleman told me about the ark. So there is a actual metal called Zorium. Okay, and this was revealed to them by an angel that came and talked to this man, and he told me about Zorium. And so Zorium is in the periodic table, and he knew about that. And there was
it's a legit metal.
Well, it's under the.
Oh, gotcha.
Okay, and there was
it's at Area 52.
There was a professor that was down in New Mexico, and he was my friend was telling me about him and how they both were playing around with this Zorium that they found, and Zorium was only found in Sweden and Utah. And some of the Zorium was here near the mine, near the relief mine. And so they believe that the plates, the golden plates that came with the Book of Mormon, was made of Zorium because it was brought out of this mine. And so Zorium is a collector. It's like a capacitor. And so when the Ark of the Covenant was made, it looks and acts just like gold, but it's Zorium. And so it's golden in color. It has all this. So the Ark, they believe, wasn't made of pure gold. It was Zorium. And Zorium is a collector of what? Energy. And so it has a release. Right?
Yeah.
So here's the Ark, and we know about the Ark and how it zapped people and did all this.
Yeah.
Had all the power. Now think about this for a minute. We're going back to electricity. So here's the electricity, and here's the Ark, and they carry it on what? Wooden poles.
Yeah.
Leather gloves. And here comes this guy with bare feet, and this Ark starts to tip, and what does he do? He reaches up with his hand, and he gets
killed,
grounded.
Oh, I thought he died.
Yeah, he dies.
Oh, yeah.
Because the electricity goes through him and it kills him, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Zorium, according to this man, Zorium was part of cold fusion. Remember the Utah State had this big thing about cold fusion. It was that. It was the energy that was part of that whole experiment of what was happening. Okay, so now you got an ark made of this. Now Joseph Smith comes and he does what? He comes and touches the plates and he gets thrown back on his can because of the electricity. And the angel Moroni goes, no, don't touch the, we got to teach you how to do this so you don't hurt yourself. They didn't have electricity, so he taught him about it. And so that made it a lot more valid that this could be, and that's why they didn't touch the plates. That's why they didn't do this and all that, because it was made of Zorium. Okay, and so I thought, he named the name of the professor, and I'm trying to think of his name. But anyway, so I called down there to the university in New Mexico, and they said, yes, that professor's still here. He still does stuff. Would you like to talk to him? And I said, sure. And I says, hey, my friend Tom, and blah, blah, blah. And he goes, wow, really? Tom told you that story? And I said, yeah. And he says, well, you don't tell too many folks. And he says, but let me tell you what happened. So we got this Zorium, and we put it up here in our lab, and we're messing with it, and we're hitting with all different frequencies. So you hit it with this frequency, and it just turned into flux. Now, flux is like a lightning bolt, round ball, boom, and it goes into this thing, and it starts, and it just gets really hot, and it goes right through the floor, and right through the next floor, down. It's an older building, so it's just going down, and then it hits finally the concrete at the bottom, and then kind of quiets down, and that's it. Pretty cool, huh? And I said, yeah. And he said, no, that's not the cool part. The cool part was when it turned to flux, the veil opened, and we're looking at angels.
Whoa.
And the angels are looking at us. Like,
wait,
what happened?
What?
And he's so they're looking at each other, and then all of a sudden, the veil comes back. And out it goes. Now, what was the Ark of the Covenant for?
It's the temple of God.
It's the mercy seat, right? It's the seat of God. So when they charged that, or they got it into flux mode, what happens?
You see heaven.
The veil opens, and there's God.
Jeez.
Wow.
Who's this guy?
Yeah, pretty cool stuff. He passed away not long ago, but he was an old man when I was.
Wow.
He was like 89. But so now you start looking at the thought process, how that works. Now, also some of the information was that the hypercephalus. Have you heard of that? That's the round. That's the round thing in the Pearl of Great Price in Mormonism. And they found these underneath the heads of the mummies in Egypt. And according to legend,
so this is legit, or this is legend.
Yeah, some of it's legend, but it's legit in the Mormon culture.
Oh, I mean like the things they found.
Oh yeah, they found those.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
You can see those. You can find them all over. They've studied them and tried to figure out what they are and everything else. And and I have a friend. He's actually finding out things more than even Hugh Nibley did. And so, but those round things had different messages in them. And there were different frequencies and different things that you would say. And back to words, how powerful words are. When you said these particular words, it would light up the Ark of the Covenant. And so what was the hypercephalus? And so my friend taught me, he said, it was basically like a remote control for the Ark.
Whoa.
So you want to open up the Ark, you say this word, you say this word, and you say this word in sequence. And then it'll open.
Power to words for sure, like the Arianic blessing. And, there's words are so powerful.
I got cursed by a guy one time. He gave me a blessing, and I was sicker than a dog on my couch. I thought I was going to die. and so did my wife. But I sat there forever, and I prayed, and I got an answer. Sometimes you don't, sometimes you do. And it said to say these 3 words 3 times in a row. Now that's also a bad thing. Witches do that too, right? So I'm like, well, but it's going to heal me. And so I said those 3 words. They're Hebrew words, a mixture of Moses, and it's a healing word, I found out later. And I said those 3 words 3 times in a row, and I immediately got better.
Wow.
Broke the curse. And I walked up the stairs, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, wow, what just happened? And I was watching some video, and it popped up about Muhammad. And the story in Muhammad's life, when he was young, he was cursed by what they call a string curse, okay, a tide. They tied him in a knot. And so they put the name on there, and then they tie it in a knot. And then all these people die. And so he was dying, and he said that the angel Raphael came to him and told him 3 words to say. And so that saved his life.
You're talking about the Prophet Muhammad of Islam. Yeah.
When he was,
and it was the same words you said.
Young. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been going on for almost 3 hours, which is amazing. We could go. We need to have you back. But the one thing I want to leave you guys with is religion, organized religion, whether that be the modern core of the LDS Church, whether that be your non-denominational church, whether that be Islam or whatever. We've built boxes on top of faith, and I think we can all agree with that. Institutional boxes. And those boxes are echo chambers. If you question the box or any part of it, you're questioning the quote-unquote faith. And Dan Bramer in the show says, we put faith in our faith in God, not in the God of our faith. And so this conversation today with you, Kevin, has just been amazing because I agree with some things you say. I disagree with it, but that is the beauty of conversation, and there is not enough conversation today. And so thank you for all your knowledge and wisdom and life experience. And like this has been wildly entertaining and helpful for me, even because it's fun to listen to you and push back and you to push back. And the bigger thing is, what did you say the 2 prophets agreed with that the LDS Church was going to not control, but spiritual and financial.
Heber J. Grant was going to.
What did he say?
Put us in bondage.
In bondage. Yeah. And I see most organized religion through our research as they have trapped us in bondage for our money. And the way they do that is through spiritual bondage.
Yes.
And we've just built institutions on the back of Christ. And it's time to look at those institutions and really do research for yourself. So, Kevin, it's an honor to meet you, brother. And a great conversation. We'll do it again for sure.
Yes. Okay.
So, thank you. Thank you, Chris. Have a good one, guys.
Thanks, brother.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Yeah.